there is nothing that you are trying to do that nobody's ever tried before. Like, you can literally look up anywhere, YouTube, podcasts, books, like you name it, and find somebody that's done something and learn from them.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Yeah, Matt, I had to make sure we hit record this time because it's taken us like 7 months to get this going because the last time I forgot to hit record, but that's all right. How are you
It's all
doing?
good. I'm good. Everything has been busy. I'm actually in Memphis today for a speaking engagement, but fly back to Austin tonight. So I flew up here late last night
Wow.
and then fly back late tonight. But everything's good. Kids are back in school. Cold weather is on the horizon in Texas, and I
Yeah,
can't
same
complain.
here. I can't wait for it to get a little cooler, although I don't mind the heat. It's all good. But thanks for taking your time out. I really appreciate it. Are you
Of
ready?
course.
Let's go do this.
I'm ready.
You have
Yeah, I'm
you have
ready.
an
Let's do
amazing
it.
background, and I like to let my guests tell their story wherever they want to pick up, and then we'll just go from there.
Cool. Let's do it.
So,
Well, look, I mean, first of all, Sue, I'm super grateful to be with you and for everything that you're doing with the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I think that the more content that's available to people in the world, the better the world is. The cool thing about what I've experienced in my life and what a lot of people are getting to experience now is you can find the way or make the way to do anything you want. And I was literally telling my friend this the other day. I'm like, there is nothing that you are trying to do that nobody's ever tried before. Like, you can literally look up anywhere, YouTube, podcasts, books, like you name it, and find somebody that's done something and learn from them. And so, the story of my life so far is all about just learning and growing and being around really cool people that are doing really cool things. I was born in a small town in Wisconsin, two amazing parents. Actually, my dad retires tomorrow on Friday from 42 years at the same
oh my,
company. My mom has worked at the Chamber of Commerce in the local area for, I don't even know, 15, 16, 17 years. And the only reason it hasn't been longer is because she was this, sort of stay at home mom and wanted to be around my sister and I as we grew up and wanted to be present for all of our sporting things and take us to school and on days off, take us to do fun things. So grew up with two amazing parents, both sort of like, hardworking, middle class, amazing people, and very athletic growing up, played a lot of sports and loved to compete. Have always been fortunate to be surrounded by some really cool friends, and still to this day have some really cool dear friends that are from Wisconsin that live there. So I always had felt a little bit, I would say, off or different, Sue. Like, I've always just had sort of like an internal itch or an internal sort of drive to kind of find the way or make the way to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want. And you had kind of asked me earlier, like, what about key pivotal moments or key pivotal sort of like things that have happened? And I would tell you, like, pivotal moments happen constantly. I don't think we can, sort of connect the dots looking forward, as Steve Jobs says, but I do think we can connect them looking backwards. And when you look backwards, you find sort of like all of these little key moments and all of these little sort of like aha moments where you're like, wow, that led to this or that led to that. The family office I run, David Osborne's group in Austin, Texas, his mother, Althea, is this incredible woman in her upper 80s and, worked for MI6 and was very early in Keller Williams and just this beautiful, powerful soul. And she calls those moments Godwinks. Like, they're just kind of these like little moments in time where kind of God winks at you if you're spiritual or believe in that. And so for me, like, my pivotal moments, I remember I was probably 10, 11, 12, something like that. And I wanted to order pizza, and I asked my mom if we could order pizza, and she went underneath the counter and grabbed the phone book because we didn't have the internet at that time, dropped it on the counter and said, look up the number and call. Like, and it like kind of gave me this aha early on, like, you can do whatever you want to do. So, I when I was 18 years old, I wanted to buy a motorcycle. My parents said, absolutely not. And I was like, okay, I got that. So I went to Kohler Credit Union to learn how you could get a sort of a loan. And at 18, you don't have any credit. You can't get anything. So I asked the banker, I was like, well, what would I do? He's like, well, you need to establish credit. I'm like, well, how do you establish credit? He's like, well, you open up a credit card. So I'm like, well, okay. So, at 18, you can't really get many credit cards, but there's one place that will give anybody money, and that's Kohl's, like the department store. So I went to Kohl's and said, I want to open up a Kohl's credit card. Like, I'm like, okay, cool. Fill out this form. And they're like, great, you qualify for $300. I'm like, sweet, $300. So I remember buying clothes early on and things from Kohl's and just paying off my credit card. And after a couple months, I went back to the banker and said, hey, I've got my credit. Like, what do I need to do to get a loan? And fill out this application, go through this form. And long story short, I qualified for like $6,000 plus or minus for a motorcycle loan at 18. So I remember going on eBay and I found this amazing motorcycle that I wanted to buy that was in Seattle, Washington. And I lived in Wisconsin. And I messaged the guy and said, hey, I really want to buy this motorcycle. Like, could we do a Skype call so I could check out the motorcycle? So we did a Skype call. I check out the motorcycle. He shows me it runs, all this stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll buy it. So I buy this motorcycle through eBay, hire a shipping company to ship my motorcycle from Seattle, Washington, all the way to Wisconsin. And one summer morning, I'm standing outside and my dad goes, he's cutting the grass. And he goes, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm waiting for my motorcycle. Like, rolled his eyes, turned the lawnmower back on, kept
Did he believe you?
And no, he didn't believe me. No. About 15 minutes later, this giant semi pulls up to the front of our house, and he's in the backyard cutting the grass. They take this motorcycle off this giant semi, take it off the crate, roll it into the driveway, sign the papers, and off they go. And he comes around to the front yard, and he looks at me and goes, what's that? I said, my motorcycle. It's like, what the F? What are you talking about, your motorcycle? I said, well, I bought a motorcycle. And he's like, how did you do that? And I kind of told him, and he kind of looked at me like, I told you no, but then there was another part of him that looked at me that was like, I'm impressed you pulled that off. And it turned out to be a stupid decision because they're so powerful and dangerous. Now, I didn't get hurt or anything happened, but like, they're just freaking rocket machines between your legs. So it's definitely, I see why my parents said at 18, don't have one. But I got the motorcycle. I had it for a year and a half and sold it and didn't lose money, didn't make money, had some fun. Actually, my dad enjoyed riding it almost as much as I did. So he was taking it out for rides. So, there's all these little moments in my life that have kind of showed me that when you want to do something, Sue, that you can find the way or make the way to do whatever you want. And again, the world is full of resources. The world is full of information that can provide you with, the stepping stones or the instructions or the obstacles or the roadblocks and how to get around those roadblocks to doing anything you want to do. Started dating pretty much my best friend at the time, who's now, happens to be my wife. And at the time, she was going to college in Minnesota, and she said she was going to go move to the inner city schools of Washington, D.C. to teach. And I said, okay, cool, I'll go with you. And she's like, I didn't really invite you with me. And I said, well, I'm going with you anyway. So we moved to Washington, D.C. I was 23. She would have been probably 21, 22. And another, crazy story. Like, I'm like, okay, cool. We're going to spend the summer in Baltimore because she's got to go to training. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to go with you. I've never been there. So I went on Craigslist, found some girl that was subletting her apartment at Johns Hopkins University, sent her a certified check. She sent me the keys to this apartment. We drive all the way to Baltimore, Maryland, just outside of Baltimore. And we pull up and we go to this like crazy row house. I mean, we're two Wisconsin kids. Like, we haven't seen cities like this. I mean, we visited them, but not, to say like, oh, this is home. We pull up to this row house. We have to climb all the way up to the 4th floor of this row house, these like super tight stairs. And we get all the way up there and start trying to open the door with this key that I received in the mail. And it was like, the door wouldn't open. And like, my heart sank. My heart, it's just beating through my chest. Melissa, she looks at me. Her eyes are like wide open. Here I, sent this lady $2,000 via certified check. Melissa goes, let me try. She like all of a sudden walks up, wiggles it a little bit, and thank God the door opens and we walk right in.
Wow.
And, just like all these cool little like stories that I have that looking backwards, like my theme in my life has always been find the way or make the way. And, I've kind of been wrestling with this concept lately sort of called like the Underdog Society. Like I've been an underdog through everything I've done, and I love being the underdog. I love being counted down and counted out. Like, you just have so much power inside of you, Sue, as a human being, to do what you want to do if you put your mind to it. And I just am super grateful to be raised by some really powerful parents who have allowed me to be who I want to be, who have allowed me to become who I wanted to become. I'm very fortunate to have an incredible wife who has really pushed me to go look for more and seek more, have great friends around me that have supported me, have incredible mentors like, David Osborne or Pat Hyben or Tim Rode, all of whom who have been or will be on your show, that have poured into me. And, I've always been a student of life. So, even last night, for instance, I flew up to Memphis to speak, and I ended at the airport at 10:50 p.m. or something like that. And the Uber driver picks me up, and he's clearly not from America. And I just started asking him questions. And, I have this belief that there's something that every single person you come in contact with every day that can teach you. And, you look at sort of the journey that I've been on, or the journey maybe you've been on, Sue, or the journey that any of the listeners have been on. And, it's not easy. It's not all rainbows and sunshines. It's definitely a grind. But then you talk to this guy who came over here from Africa, and, he's telling me his story, and I'm like, man, woe is me, right? Like, I think I've had rough days. Like, geez Louise. And you're still, and here this guy is driving Uber at night after working a full day because he's trying to provide for his 3 kids. I've always been learning based. I've always looked to learn, looked to seek knowledge and information and wisdom. And then I've always just known that I can find the way or make the way. So I'm grateful for the journey and excited for what's up to come, and excited for what's next.
Well, Matt, I love your story. I mean, there's just so much in there. You mentioned, well, a couple of things. I'm thinking about the motorcycle story where your parents told you no. And you also mentioned that you have a competitive nature. So they told you no, and you have a competitive nature. Did that drive you? Like, how do you feel when people tell you no in that?
Well, look, that's an
Yeah.
interesting question. It's an interesting question because I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old daughter. And one of the things I try not to say too much is no, but as parents, like, that's just a word that
Right.
comes
Yeah.
out, right? Is no. And my daughter, my 4-year-old, she hates the word no. Like, if you tell her no, it's almost like she rolls her eyes and does it anyways. And I think that's sort of how I
Mhm.
felt, Sue. That's sort of how I have been. Is, you know, look, there's definitely reasons in life that no is the right answer, right? Like, no doubt about it. At times there's the reason no, but for me it's like, why the word no? Now, the word no for my parents for that motorcycle was, we're not going to support and help you support buying something that's a death machine. And so it was like, okay, well, what I heard was, we're not going to help you. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, you don't have to help me. And so I just found the way or made the way. Now if the police say, like, you can't rob a bank, and the answer is no there, like, I understand the logic and the ramifications and the reasonings, right? So one of the things that I've always enjoyed to do, Sue, is I've always enjoyed challenging the status quo. So for me, it's not, the word no is an interesting word. And for me, do you have those like speed bumps where you're at, where like there are those giant like
Oh, yeah.
asphalt humps in the road to
Mhm.
slow you down, right? For me, the word no is one of those giant asphalt humps. They're not a stop sign, they're not a red stoplight, but they're these giant asphalt things. And if you're driving over those giant asphalt speed bumps, like, you definitely want to slow down, right? Because, like, otherwise you're going to catch air and you're going to hit your head on the ceiling. But you do also have the choice to blow through it and gun it, right? And so you use your awareness, you use your curiosity to go, okay, why is this here? What's going on? Okay, it's a school zone. It's the middle of summer. It's 9 o'clock at night. I understand that they want us to slow down generally during school times. There's nobody around. The streetlights are shining bright as can be. Do I really need to go over that speed hump at 5, or is 15 acceptable today? And that's kind of how I perceive the word no, is like, got it. I understand that there's some reason, logic, idea around the word no, but let's use our curiosity, let's use our awareness to look at all of the other reasonings, and then make a decision that's best for us and best for the path that we're
Yeah,
choosing
I'm
for our
glad you
lives.
said that. And the reason I asked is I'm also the type of person that if somebody tells me no, and like you were saying, there's different types of no, right? When somebody tells me that you can't do that, and I know I can accomplish that goal, like, forget it. And it's funny
Yeah.
how in the English language, what we hear isn't always what the other person says, you know? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just matter of interpretation. Parents said no, and you heard, "Well, we're not gonna help you." And look where it got you. So you carried that determination through. One thing you said, and I'd like you to unpack it. You said you like to be counted down and counted out. Could you
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
you unpack that a little bit? I find that a very intriguing quote.
Yeah, like I mean, interesting, right? Like to be the underdog is this interesting place to be, right? People are, thinking less of you or maybe not thinking you're capable of doing it. And there's nothing more sort of thrilling for me than to have somebody say to me like you won't do that or you can't do that and be like, okay, cool, got you, I hear you loud and clear, thank you for your opinion, watch me go. And the reason that it's so exciting to me, the reason that it's so cool to me is it shows you how powerful you are as a human. So growing up, again, I was a very competitive athlete and I played a ton of soccer. And our soccer team was really, really good growing up through all the way through high school. And I happened to be a goalie. Well, if you know anything about soccer, you would know that goalies, generally speaking, are not the 5'5", 5'6" guy. They're usually the 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2" guy, right? But growing up, my dad played goalie, and I remember going to his games when I was a kid, and I was like, oh, I want to be a goalie, right? Every kid wants to be like their parent or like their mentor or like their hero. And so I was like, oh, I want to be a goalie. I want to be a goalie. And everybody's like, you won't be a goalie. You're too small. Well, I found ways to compensate for my height. I used my quickness. I got my jumping abilities, all this stuff. And I just had to figure out a way to play the game differently than anybody else knew how to play the game and challenge the status quo. And, turned out to play four. I played 4 years on varsity, but I started really solidly all three of my sophomore, junior, senior year. We went to the state tournament twice. We were ranked one in state, never won it, but lost in the state finals my junior year. I was recruited to play college soccer. Didn't play college soccer, but I could have at D3-ish levels, and we were awesome. But nobody thought I was going to be good at goalie. Like they were like, "You're too small," and so when you take those, receipts, as Deion Sanders calls it, or you take those concepts that people have of like, you're not good enough and you're not going to make it, and you store those in the back of your brain. And when you don't want to get up at 5 a.m. to work out, or you don't want to go back to the gym at 9 p.m. to get that extra grind in, like you play that little ticket, you play that little receipt, and you go, okay, cool. Yeah. Like I'm not going to. And you use that as fuel. You use that as motivation. Cause Ben Hardy wrote this book called Willpower Won't Work. And the idea is like our willpower is like our gas tank. It only gets us so far in life, right? So like I want to do something, it gets us so far. And I found that my willpower will get me so far, but the haters, the doubters, the questioners, those little receipts are the extra little fuel I need to go and work that extra hour or answer that extra set of emails at 3 a.m. or go back to the gym at 9 p.m. or whatever it might be. And so I've always found that it's that extra little fuel that I need to achieve the life that I want. So I enjoy the underdog status. I enjoy the people thinking I can't do it. I enjoy being counted down and counted out. And I'm not one to be super showy and ego-y, like in your face, like, look what I did. But I let my actions speak louder than my words. And I just kind of put my head down and go do what I want to do when I want to do it and achieve what I said I'm going to achieve. And, whether they see it or not, I don't care. It's all about me. It's all for me and my family. And I love it. It's
I
just
love
fuel
that
for
you
me.
share that story because I'm sure that there are people listening that's had those things told to them. You can't do that, or you're not going to be a good goalie, and
Yeah.
how often we listen to those voices outside of our head, and we listen to those people and we allow them to dictate how our life goes. What I love about your story is that you didn't let people tell you what to do. You took it as like, thank you for your belief, but I don't have to take that for myself. So I really want to pull that out
Right.
because there's people that live life where they listen to everybody else and they're not true and authentic to themselves. And out of that too, I also hear like you set goals. If somebody said to you, you can't go do something, or even if they ask you to do something, I mean, I know a little bit of, because we've talked before too. I know you live a very intentional life and you set goals for
Yeah.
yourself. Would you share a story of a big goal that you set and that you maybe the back of your mind said, I don't know if I'm going to get to that one, but then it wound up manifesting itself. And what did you do to get you over that?
Yeah, I mean, look, and the other thing I'll just add real quick for those listening to this is like I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. So when people doubt me, people count me out, like those words sometimes can echo and radiate in your head if you're in a slump or you're, feeling a little down on yourself. And, sometimes those words can be a little bit louder and they might hold you back a little bit, or they might cause you to pause, or they might cause a little bit of self-doubt. I heard this quote when I was younger that said, the only difference between a rut and a grave is how long you choose to stay there. And so I get in ruts all the time. Life happens. It's okay. I just don't choose to stay there very long. And the way that I get out of them is I look at my goals. I have really good people around me that hold me accountable, that support me, that push me. But, there's millions of quotes about how we overestimate what we can accomplish in one, underestimate what we can accomplish in 5 years. There's so many goals over the years, too, that I've set that I'm like, I'm just going to write this down and see what happens. The interesting thing is once you understand the concept of goal setting and the power of goal setting, and maybe even more importantly, the power of having a vision for your life, you understand that you can actually predict the future. So you can use sort of your subconscious mind, your reticular activating system, and sort of like the awarenesses that you have subconsciously to bring things into your conscious life or your conscious mind that you maybe didn't think you could. In 2020, would have been 2021. Well, 2020, actually, I decided to set the goal of riding a bull. And people say, well, why would you ride a bull? I was like, look, I think you have to put yourself in a position where you feel fear and choose through the fear, in spite of the fear, to accomplish what you want to do. So every year I try to put myself in a really uncomfortable position where I have to go, holy cow, I am really freaking scared. I don't want to do this, and then do it anyways. So that when things come up in business, things come up in parenting, things come up in relationship, if I'm scared, I continue to choose through it. I don't stop, right? The worst thing I think we can do as humans is stop and freeze. Like I think, action beats inaction 100% of the time is what David Osborne taught me. And so like you always want to keep taking action. You always want to keep choosing. So in 2020, I set the goal of riding a bull. Well, if anybody on this call was around in 2020, they know that COVID happened. Well, the whole world kind of just shifted underneath our feet. Now, could I have still found a way to ride a bull that year? Absolutely. But it was just a complicated year. It was just, there were so many things and so many different sort of fears and awarenesses and challenges that I just didn't have the opportunity in 2020 to ride the bull. Now, could I have beat myself up? Yes. Did some people say, like, I told you weren't going to ride the bull? Yes. Were the doubters still there? Yes, absolutely. But I looked inside and said, that is still an important thing for me to do. I think it would be a cool experience. So in 2021, I put it back on my goals and said, I'm going to find a way to ride a bull. I was speaking at an Emergent event, which you're very familiar with, Sue, and somebody said, how do you challenge yourself? And I said, look, the way I challenge myself is I put myself in really uncomfortable positions every single year. And they're like, well, what would that look like? I'm like, this year I'm going to ride a bull. And they're like, well, how are you going to do that? I said, I have no idea, but I'm going to find the way or make the way. Well, after I was done speaking, this guy, Matt, comes up to me from San Antonio and he goes, my friend's brother's uncle's cousin's son, or one of those weird, like multi sort of level removed, is on the fast track to becoming a professional bull rider. Do you want me to connect you with him? He has bulls. I'm like, yes, please. So like this guy connects me to this other guy, and all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I want to ride a bull. He's like, okay, great. What day? And I'm like, how about the day before New Year's Eve? So December 30th. He's like, yeah, that works. I'm like, okay, cool. He sends me his address. It's like 3 hours from our house. And my in-laws were in town watching our daughter. And my wife and our two close friends went with me. And so we drive all the way out there and we pull up to this, crazy house. It's, it's a typical like middle of nowhere Texas town. It's, it's a sort of ranch, but it's really just an A-frame on cinder blocks and bulls in the backyard. And we open the gate by hand with the chain, walk in, and I text the guy, hey, we're here, Billy. And he's like, okay, cool. He comes out, he introduces himself, and he goes, well, let me go get my son. He's the one that's going to teach you. I'm like, okay. Like I didn't ask any of these questions in advance, right? I just kind of showed up. So all of a sudden out walks this 16-year-old kid. He's like a broomstick, just this little twig kid, and starts talking to me and introducing himself and stuff. And he's the one that taught me how to
Wow.
ride a bull. Now, like, what was cool about it was this 16-year-old kid. I said, well, tell me about your goals. And he said, well, I'm going to be the youngest 2-time professional world bull riding champion. Like, he had all these goals, crystal clear outlined. I was like, okay, cool. So, his dad was there, Billy was there watching him, but he's kind of like let his son do this. It's his son's passion. So the kid puts me on this barrel. It's called like a buckrite, I believe. And it's essentially just this big oil barrel that just goes up and down. And the concept is to teach you how to kind of like move with the bull. And so he puts me on that for maybe 3 minutes, shows me what to do. He goes, okay, are you ready? I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. So we walk down to the backyard. He goes under the front seat of the truck, pulls out this giant folder of waivers, is like, just sign one of these. I signed one of those. And I rode a bull. Now, it was scary. It was like your heart races. It was crazy. I got unlucky, got thrown into the fence, and landed in a way that ruptured my Achilles tendon. So I got unlucky. But I had this incredible experience that showed me, like, even when fear shows up, like, on the other side of fear is really awesome, cool things. Now, like, you have to be careful, right? Because, like, people are like, well, you could have died. Like, yes, I could have died, but I could die walking out of the house tomorrow, right? Like, I could step off the curb at the wrong time, a bus could hit me, a drunk driver could hit me, whatever it is, right? Like, we could always die. That's always a possibility. I don't live with that fear. And the reason I don't live with that fear is because I saw one of my closest friends die when I was 22 years old. Like, I witnessed it, and I was like, wow, if that's what death is, and that's how it can be, is just like that. In the blink of an eye, you never know what's going to happen. I'm not going to not make choices in my life based off of that as a possibility, because it's always a possibility. And then on the other side of like this, riding a bull was this just really cool, like, I mean, I've never had an adrenaline rush like that in my entire life.
All this goal setting, I love it. Did you always set goals for yourself? Like, was that natural for you, or did at some point you realize, wait a minute, if I start like writing this stuff down, it'll start manifesting itself?
Yeah, look, I've always set goals. Now, writing down a goal is just like the next level, right? So I've always set goals. Just again, as being an athlete, like you have a goal going into the season, or you have a goal going into that wrestling tournament, or whatever it was for me. I had goals, right? But I never wrote them down. When I was 23, I went and watched David Osborne teach a class on sort of, goal setting and visioning. And I was, I'm dropped out of college. So I'm kind of sitting there going like, man, why did I come to a class? Like, I already didn't do school well. Like, what am I doing here? And that was when I was probably a little bit more judgmental around like sort of being learning based, and I wasn't quite as open. But that sort of is the moment when I look back, like you asked at the beginning, that kind of changed my life. Was I put myself in this position that was uncomfortable. I had all of these judgments. Looking back, all the judgments were just fear and like anxiousness around being around new people in a classroom, pushing myself, all that stuff, right? So now I put myself in that position constantly. But he was talking about having a vision for your life. And he had this purple journal, and he's like, this is my journal. And I'm like, kind of, judging it. Everything I felt was judgment, and I'm rolling my eyes. And the thing that I would tell you, Sue, and that I tell anybody listening is, once you enter into judgment, all you see is the 4 boxes or the 4 walls around you, and you can't see anything else that's possible. And so we all get into these judgment phases. But the problem with judgment is you remove all other possibility of anything else being true, because you're just in judgment. Like, oh my God, he's got a purple journal. Like, who is this guy? Now I lose all possibility to learn from him, grow from him. Like, just, it's all gone, right? Because I reside in this judgment. Well, he talks about setting goals, having a vision for your life, a vision board. He shows this incredible vision board, says, this was my vision. And somebody says, wait, time out. Like, what do you mean it was your vision? He's like, oh, well, all this stuff has already come true in my life. So my wife's making me another vision board. And it was like, a plane. It was a beautiful house in Austin, a beautiful family, tons of contribution, tons of real estate all over the place. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, have a vision for my life, buy a purple journal, was what I wrote in my notes.
How'd you get yourself out of the judgment box?
It was like when he said all of this shit's come true, so my wife's making me another one. It was like somebody walked up to me, slapped me across the face twice, and said, like, wake up, dude. You don't have the slightest idea of what's possible in this world. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. I don't know. I didn't do anything. It's like the universe, God, whatever you believe in, just kind of like said, dude, wake up. Like, there's a message to receive from this man. Listen. And I listened. And then I took that and implemented it in my life and started listening to all of these different messages and started to implement all that stuff in my life and said, wow, like, if I actually put this stuff into practice, my life will change. And it changed big time. I remember when I was probably a couple months after that, I had some goals for my net worth. Looking back, I think when I had first started setting goals and doing my one sheet, which is a technology that we use inside of GoBundance, my net worth was about negative $35,000 because I thought I was like really cool when I was younger and had some money. And so I bought a BMW, which was the dumbest decision in my life, but that's okay. If that's the worst thing I ever do, life will be okay. So I think I had a net worth of negative 35,000. I actually just looked back on that one sheet not too long ago because I save all of this stuff. I save all my journals. And so at that moment in time, I was reading a bunch of books, and I read this book that was called Rich Couples Finish Last or something along those lines. And really the concept was around dinks, dual income, no kids. And the idea was when you have two incomes with no kids, you should save 100% of one of your incomes and spend 100% of the other ones. And so here I am with this girlfriend, like again, who's now my wife. And I'm looking at Melissa and I'm like, okay, you're making your money teaching. I'm making my money working for Pat Hyben. Let's do this. Let's save 100% of your money and let's live 100% off of my money because you're making more money than me. So let's save all your money. Let's live off of all of my money. And then let's see what happens. Well, that one decision to implement that for 12 months of our life, albeit a little bit uncomfortable, not really that bad. Looking back, it was kind of more fun. But looking back, that one decision is what allowed us to have enough money saved up when we moved to Austin, Texas, and a house came available. We were able to buy the house. That house was $273,000. 3 years later, we sold it for $585,000. So like that one decision to read that book, implement the one thing that was like stuck out to me in that book, which is live off of one of your incomes, save 100% of the others, literally changed the trajectory for us forever because it put us in a position where we were able to take advantage of an opportunity and parlay that into a win, parlay that into another win. And it kind of was one of like the sort of stepping stones or catapults for me. So when you say what kind of got me to get out of judgment, again, it was just like some like ghost or spirit or being walked up to me and slapped me across the right side and then backhanded me across the left and said, like, dude, the world is full of messages to teach you and listen. You need to just listen. Remain curious and listen. And so to this day, like, do I land in judgment? Yes, all of the time. But I try not to stay there, Sue. So like I catch myself in judgment. I try to quickly ask myself 3 questions. Like the hardest place to do this, honestly, is parenting in my relationship with my wife, because that's where I'm most comfortable. And so like it's easiest to land in judgment there, but I still try not to do it. So, like my kid might be whining a bunch. And as parents, we just want to be like, dude, stop whining. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, Rylan, what's wrong? I see you're whining. How do you feel? Where does that feel? What happened? What can I do? Do you need a hug? And like, right? Like, so my judgment is like, dude, stop whining. It's not gonna get you anywhere in life. But my curiosity says, well, wait, the whining is her saying, I need something. Let me get in connections with what she needs and listen and be present and see if I can help. And sometimes I can, and sometimes I can't because the Barbie's hair is not braided in the right way and it's just a bad day, right? It's a 4-year-old. It's a bad day. But I'm not going to judge her for that. I'm going to go like, wow, I see that you're really upset about your Barbie's hair. I'm sorry you feel that way. And then just let her be her, right? And again, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There's days, there's good days, there's bad days, there's frustrating days, there's great days. But I don't judge me for it. I'm just working through all of this stuff and just being present with what shows up. Like my communications coach says, like, have empathy for yourself. So like I'm trying to practice this concept of empathy. Like I'm really good at having empathy for others, but when it comes to myself, I'm pretty critical and pretty harsh. And so I'm trying to have
what does empathy look like for you then?
Why did I eat that? Or why didn't I work out? Or why did I hit snooze? Like those are all judgments, but instead it's like, wow, you hit snooze because you needed that extra 15 minutes today. It's okay. Take that extra 15 minutes for you. And then go tackle the day. Or like, how did you feel about hitting snooze? Well, I felt like I got that extra 15 minutes of rest and I didn't feel any more rested. And then I felt a little judgment and a little negative. And okay, cool. Tomorrow when it's an opportunity to hit snooze, will you choose to hit snooze or will you choose something else? And for me, it's all about just kind of like being aware of things. I'm still very like win, lose, right? So like I still am very competitive. So, the other day I played in a golf tournament with David and there was a couple shots I could have hit a little differently, a couple shots maybe he could have hit a little differently. But I kind of like, I don't judge myself, but I'm very critical of like, okay, what could I have done differently in the moment? Because that opportunity will present itself again, although it might look a little bit different. what choices will I make in that moment, right? And you can take those analogies from golf, or you can take those concepts from life or parenting or whatever, and apply it to whatever you're working on and say, okay, well, when opportunities show back up, Sue, what will I choose? Will I choose something differently, or will I
Yeah, it's a
choose the
fine
same?
line between being critical and judgmental. Where you look at your
Yeah, I think
evaluation
that's right.
of what you've done, it's like, "Okay, I could do that differently." I think judgment is when we choose to live there too long, and it goes to the
Mm,
negative versus the empathy. So, as
yeah.
I was listening to you, I realized that your empathy that you talk to yourself is more of a positive, almost like a warm blanket. You put that around you and you're like, "Okay, I can have this for others. I need to do this for myself." Whereas the judgment always goes down to the negative, that negative path. How much better off we would be for ourselves and the people around us if we just backed off and had a little bit more empathy for just ourselves and then to pass it on to others. And the other thing you said too is mindfulness and
Mhm.
how you
Yeah.
practice that and show up each day. What are some things that would be challenging for you that would challenge that mindfulness or that ability to show up? And how do you mitigate that?
I mean, there's a lot of things, right? Like, I'm not a super social being, so sometimes like being in like social environments can be really taxing. I like to move fast through life, so sometimes like slower moments like playing Barbies with my daughter can be hard for me, right? Like I I would tell you that like I'm addicted to work. Is it good? Probably not. Is it bad? Probably not. It's just it is what it is. So I have to be very intentional about like not getting lost in my email or not getting lost in my phone, or, one of the things I'm working on right now with people closest to me is I'm a really good active listener, meaning like I'm listening for the problem and I'm going to solve it. Like, I want to help. I want to help. I want to help. But there's also this concept of relational listening. And sometimes I just have to recognize that Melissa is connecting with me and doesn't want me to solve her problem. She just
Mhm.
wants me to listen. And so I would say like 9 months ago, I would have been like, okay, what do you want me to do about that? Or what's the point? But now working with my communications coach, working on some awarenesses I didn't have around types of listening and connections and relationships and stuff, I now can go like, oh, she doesn't want me to solve this. She just wants me to listen. I'm like, wow, okay, so that happened. Like, our son's first day of school was yesterday. He's 2 and he had just gotten potty trained about 2 weeks ago. So he goes to school, and the first day he has 2 accidents, wets his pants twice. And Melissa was like frustrated and beating herself up. And, the old me would have started to like solve all the problems for her, right? Like, but the newer me is like, wow, I hear that you're frustrated, but like, let's celebrate that he went to school. He was super uncomfortable for the first time. He just was potty trained 2 weeks ago. Like, how great is it that he only had 2 accidents? Like, it could have been 3, could have been 4, it could have been 5. Like, he could have cried hysterically as we left school. He could have
Yeah.
bit some, like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, and I rather than like trying to solve the problem for it, let's just put him in pull-ups, or like, let's do this or let's do that. It was like, wow, I hear you. I feel that you're sad, but don't beat yourself up. Like, you should be so proud
Yeah.
of, we got him to school. We've gotten him to a place where he's potty trained. And like, let's celebrate all of those wins for you as a mother and him as a son and us as a family. And like, sometimes we're going to pee our pants. Life goes on.
On the
I mean, nobody
On the
died. Nobody
grand
got
scheme of
hurt. It could
things,
all
it
be one.
doesn't matter, right? And
It
I
doesn't matter.
love
It
Matt,
doesn't
I'm just sitting here listening to you. You tell your stories. You're a great storyteller, by the way. And the common
matter.
theme in a lot of what you're talking about is gratefulness. You're just grateful and you
Mm.
look for the positives in everything. So the big takeaway, your small step for today is be grateful and then look for the positive in life. And I just so enjoy that because how often do we hear the bad news about what's going on in either the politics or the country or the world in general? And, discouragement can set in, or like you said, the oh, woe is me. I can't believe this is happening. But, if we're really truthful and honest with ourselves, we can find something to rejoice in, something that's positive each day. So I love that.
Yeah. And I would focus your energy and your attention on things that you
Right.
can control. Like, the media has a narrative it wants you to follow and it wants you to be in line with. And look, you have to pay attention to what's going on in the world. You can't just like turn it off and ignore it, right? Because some of those things may impact you personally or your family or your loved ones or people that you care about. So you've got to have some awareness, but you have to understand that it's like a radio, and at times you need to turn the volume down and at times you can turn the volume back up. But don't get lost in like David had this great concept around sort of living unhooked, right? So I'm a huge sports fan. Like I love watching sports, and we're huge Packers fans. We were born and raised in Wisconsin. My wife has a share of the team. Each of my children have a share of the team. Now, like, it's cool to say they own a part of the Packers. It means absolutely nothing except you overpaid for a piece of paper that you get to hang on your wall. Like, that's literally it. That's all it is. But anyways, like we're huge Packers fans, and I love watching the game. I love getting excited about the game. I love like the adrenaline of watching your team and cheering them on and yelling and come on team, let's go. But like David says, until the coach or the GM or the owner calls me after the game and says like, hey man, happy birthday, or you played great or whatever, like my life still goes on. So I might be, sad that they lost or bummed they didn't make the playoffs or whatever it is, but I don't sit there and wallow in that. I don't lose sleep over it. I'm like, well, that's cool. Like I love the team and I love cheering them on, but I can't, as no matter how loud I freaking cheer and yell at my TV, I cannot impact that game at all. Zero. And so I love it. I enjoy it. I watch it, but I also understand as soon as the game's over, my life goes on and I still have to continue to live and make my choices for my life. Those guys on the team, like they can get critical. They can get lost in sort of like, what could they have done differently? What could they have done better? They can watch the film. They can maybe change the next game's results. But for me to lose sleep over, to lose energy over, it's like the same with politics. Like, my vote matters from every vote matters. But at the end of the day, if the guy that wins the presidency isn't the guy I picked or I voted for, I can't do anything about that. I'm one vote of tons and tons and tons and tons and tons. So I can read all the drama, I can read all the stories, I can get lost in all of the, narratives and stuff, or I can say, cool, I'm going to keep living and I'm just going to be aware of what choices this president's going to make that might impact my life differently than the other one, and just apply it to my life. So I think you're spot on in sort of like live in gratitude, sort of live in curiosity, and don't get lost in things you don't have any control over. Focus on what you can control, do the best at that, and then just keep moving forward.
Excellent advice. If you can't change it, why worry about it? What's done is done. What would your 80-year-old self tell you today if it could?
God, man, I hope I live to 80. I think the most sort of powerful lesson that I'm wrestling with right now is don't lose sight of what's important.
What's important to you, Matt? What's important to you right now in your season?
And so what's important to me is to create an impact and leave like a legacy. Like it's so funny. I went on this rant the other day about this concept. So I want at my funeral, my wife and kids to be proud. And I want tons of people to celebrate and sort of like enjoy what has been created from the impact that I'm hoping to leave on the world and on the people closest to me. But I said this crazy thing. I'm like, but I definitely don't want the funeral line to be too long, because I've never understood this concept of this really sad wife and really sad children standing in line for 5 hours, getting hugs from all these people saying, we're so sorry for your loss, standing next to a casket. Like, I just never understood that concept. So I'm like, I want to be remembered, but I want my kids to be able to be at the funeral or, come visit my grave or whatever. If I get buried, I don't even know. I haven't even thought that far. I just want them to be proud and be able to say like, that was my dad. I want my wife to be like, man, that was my husband. I'm so grateful for the life we have together or had together. I want my parents to be proud. I want my in-laws to be proud. I want my sister to be proud. I want, David, who took a bet on me young, to be proud. I want Pat, who took a bet on me young, to be proud. Like, I just want to be the best version of myself that I can possibly be and impact as many lives as I can. And I just want to make people proud. I want to make people, recognize and appreciate that we did some cool stuff together. We made a difference in the world. We impact people's lives. Like, if one person can listen to your show, and I know you have way more listeners than one, but if one person listens to this show and implements one thing in their life from this concept that maybe changes their trajectory for life or changes the situation they're in, like, I could go to bed happy. I don't hear all those stories. I wish I get more of them, but I'm starting to sort of like get all of these little breadcrumbs on this trail that I've been on in my life where people say like, you said this, or I saw you here, or you did this. And I'm like, wow, that's really powerful. Like, I can't believe you listened to me. Right. Like, so I just want to make the world a better place. I want to impact people that I come in contact with. And I want to make the people closest to me, you know, proud of what I've done, proud of the man I've lived to be, proud of the husband I am, proud of the father I am, and just be the best version of myself I can
What are
possibly
some
be.
things that you're doing to help leave a legacy?
You know, it's being more aware and being more present. You know, I probably to a fault at times I will help people and go out of my way to help people, whether that's taking a call or pouring into people. I like to just do whatever I can possibly to help. I think the number one thing we can do to leave a legacy is believe in other people. I think the sort of success I look back on, you know, whether it was, you know, the underdog or being counted out, like the one thing that I always had in my life was somebody believed in me, right? It was my dad, it was my mom, it was my sister, it's my wife, it's my children, it was David, it was Pat. Like there's always been somebody that believed in me. And so when you see somebody, when you cross paths with somebody, whether they're having a good day or a bad day, like just show them that you believe in them. Like the other day, the neighbor was having a lemonade stand sale, and we live in the way back of a community, and it's like a gated front entrance. And so like, you know, she's 10, 12, 13 years old. Like she's not getting in a ton of traffic, but she's outside. It's 100 degrees and she's got cookies and lemonade. And I'm like, I stop. I'm like, I'll take a cookie and I'll take lemonade. Not because I wanted them, but because I wanted to believe in her. I wanted to show her like, I see you. And so she's like, okay, that'll be $3. And I'm like, here's 50. And it wasn't because it was like $50 is a lot of money. It's because like I wanted her to know that somebody saw her, somebody believed in her. I want my kids to know I believe in you. I see you. I want the driver last night who drove me to the hotel who was telling me that this is his second job. I'm like, man, dude, like I just want to see you. Like I want you to be seen. Because at the end of the day, Sue, I think everybody in the world that we come in contact with, there's three things we all want. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to feel loved. And so I think to leave a legacy, you see people, you hear people, and you show them that they're loved and that they're you know, appreciated and believed in. And I think if you do that, eventually the legacy will be left and the memories will be made that you were looking out for the best of people. And through doing that, I think the world will reward you as much as you possibly could imagine.
Wow, Matt, tons of nuggets of just wisdom in this last like almost hour we've been talking, and I'm so enjoying it. I have three questions, and I call them my core
Cool.
three. So let's just quick jump into them. First one, this is the easy one. At least I think so. What's your favorite book that you would recommend?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you say that's easy. There's so many. I would tell you there's like sort of three books that have changed my life. The first one is As a Man Thinketh. Pat Hyben gave me that book, wrote an incredible note in the front of it. I've read it. If I showed you my copy, it's probably double the thickness that it should be because there's sticky notes, post-it notes, there's pieces of paper shoved in there. Like I've probably read it 4 or 5 times. Probably should read it again, actually. Just mentioning it makes me think of that. Think and Grow Rich is another incredible book. And then Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think if you read As a Man Thinketh, then Think and Grow Rich, then Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you will understand that you have the power to choose to be what you want, with whom you want, wherever you want to be. And you'll too have that mindset of I can find the way or make the way to do whatever I want. I didn't create that from like snapping my fingers twice. It wasn't like I wasn't Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, click my red heels 3 times and say just like home or whatever the heck she said. I read books, I applied it, I practiced it, I looked at knowledge of others, and I took their experiences. So I'd read those 3 books.
What's one question or topic that you wish I would have asked, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
Well, look, man, that's my absolute favorite question to ask during an interview process is like, what's the one question I didn't ask you that I should have asked you? And then they always tell you, and you're like, okay, so what's the answer? Look, I think you did an incredible job. You've asked a lot of really, really insightful, really powerful questions. You know, I think one of the questions that I would have asked if I were you is like, what's something that you're wrestling with right now? Because I think it's fun to talk about sort of like how we've overcome things or how we're achieving success or how we look at the world. But every single one of us who has got, you know, demons in the closet or is wrestling with something, right? Whether it's you, whether it's me, we're all wrestling with something. And right now what I'm wrestling with is just like, who do I want to be for me? Like I told you who I want to be for everybody else, right? I want people to be proud. I want to see them. I want to love them. I want them to be believed in. But how do I want to show up for me is something I'm wrestling with right now. And that comes into like, putting myself first and thinking through like, my health and my diet and my workouts and what I'm wanting to read and what I'm wanting to practice and stuff. And it kind of stemmed from this concept of when you're flying, if anybody listening has been on an airplane, they go through the safety briefing and they say, put your air mask on first before helping loved ones, right? And the reason they say that is because if you don't have oxygen and you can't breathe, you can't help a person. And so, like I remember being younger and listening to that, and I'm like, man, mom, if you put your mask on before mine, I'm going to be pissed. Now, being an adult, I understand why that concept is there. And so I'm kind of wrestling with and thinking through this concept right now of how am I going to put my oxygen mask on first? And then how can I put the oxygen
Yeah, I'm
mask on
so glad
first?
you mentioned that because I actually the last couple days have heard that same analogy. And I think the challenge for a lot of us, and maybe this might be your challenge too, is that we have a culture where you are told like you have to serve other people, be selfless, go out there and do things for everybody else. And we don't practice self-care for ourselves. And I think beginning to realize that if once you start taking care of yourself first, it 10x's your ability to take care of everybody else around you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's well said.
Yeah. And yeah, what are some of those like do you have one hack that you're doing to help take care of yourself?
Journaling. I never have been a big journaler. I've always had to have it on my goals to make sure I did it a certain number of times. Now I'm getting to a place where I go into my journal and I'm just like, let me just get this out. Like, let me just hear me, let me see me, let me feel me, and just write whatever comes to mind. Whether it's like I'm grateful for this friendship, or I'm grateful for my wife, or my son, or my daughter, or I'm grateful for me and understanding I skipped that workout, or I went through that hard time, or whatever it is, right? So for me right now, it's just spending a lot of time in my journal, processing, thinking, playing with ideas, playing with concepts, and then once you get them on a piece of paper, all of a sudden it's like you can start to play with it. It's like Play-Doh. And once you start playing with things, then you can see how does it feel, how does it fit, and then you can make
How does
choices
that make
based
you
on that.
feel when you get those out of your head and onto the paper?
Sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes light, sometimes heavy, sometimes sad, sometimes happy. Like it's always different. It just depends on what comes out and what shows up. But what follows from it always is just more awareness. And I think that the number one thing we can all be seeking is awareness. And the way to receive awareness is through curiosity. So I use journaling as more of a curiosity thing, not necessarily like how do I feel, but it's like, okay, cool. Now what? Now what? Now what? Like, and just kind of see what shows up. And what it feels like is kind of coming true for me is that I'm just getting more awareness from the journaling process, which is
Mm.
power.
So as we close, and I think this question is going to tie into what you were just talking about, what's your one small step someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Man, I'd find 3 to 5 people and just see them. Like, you know, um, whether you're checking out at the grocery store, or last night I was walking through the airport again. It was like 11 o'clock in Memphis, and there was this older guy and he was sweeping the floor. And my father-in-law says this all the time. He goes up to random people. He's like, did anybody tell you you're doing a great job today? Um, and I just like saw this guy sweeping, and he just kind of looked like life was beating him down. And I just like stopped him. I was like, hey man, thanks for all you do. And he lit up like a freaking Christmas tree. It cost me $0, cost me about 13 seconds of my time, maybe 15 seconds of my time, but the feeling I had after that, I mean, so what I would tell everybody to do is find 3 to 5 people and just see them, appreciate them. Cool shirt. I love how you show up. Hey, I just want you to know that you made an impact on my life. Text that person that you have been avoiding the text on and saying like, thank you for all you do, whatever it is. See and feel and appreciate 3 to 5 people, and then journal about it and see how you feel. I believe that if every single person that listened to this saw and appreciated and believed in 3 to 5 people, then reflected on it, they would see inside of them a more powerful person that can see and believe in themselves. And if we all do that, Sue, we can all achieve whatever we want to achieve, which is, I think, what life
Change
is
the
all
world.
about.
That's thank you, Matt. It's
Yeah, thank
beautiful,
you.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Your contact stuff I'll put down in the show notes. If people want to reach out to you, they
Thanks.
can.
Yes.
They'll be able to find you on Instagram and emails there too. I can't thank you enough. This was an awesome time together. Awesome interview.
Well, I appreciate you, Sue. There's not many people that would take a podcast at 5:30 in the morning because that's what worked best for my schedule. So I'm grateful for all you do, the way you show up, the information you're pouring into the world through your podcast, and the person you are. Thanks for having me. And if I can do anything to
Thank
help you,
you.
just let me
Well,
know.
same back at you, friend. All right.
Thank you,
Thanks.
man. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, check out my website, personalcoachfinder.com, and find someone who can help. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps today and make your life awesome, friends.